You're now listening to Directing Magic with your host, Marquette Jones.
Hello, and welcome back to Directing Magic podcast. I am super excited today. I'm always excited to come back on the podcast and talk to a new filmmaker. So this time I'm talking to Melissa Haizlip. She is the director of Mr. Soul with an exclamation point.
Yes, thank you for having me. So great
Hi.
to be here. With an exclamation point too.
Welcome
Hi.
to the show. So can you
Thanks.
tell everyone a little bit about your movie?
Sure. So it's a feature documentary and it's called Mr. Soul. It's about the first Black Tonight Show, which was a show called Soul. I like to say it's the greatest show you've never heard of. Soul was actually a television show that was on PBS from 1968 to 1973. And it was launched locally at first out of New York City on the flagship PBS station, Channel 13, WNET. And then after the Public Broadcasting Act, it went live and nationwide for the next 4 years. And Soul was unique because, you know, it came on during a time of great tumult, right after Martin Luther King was assassinated. The riots were happening, you know, the folks were trying to find their way on the heels of civil rights movement and Jim Crow. It was a really volatile time in America. And there were no Black people on television, at least not in a positive light. You know, they were framed as negative. People of color were not given equal time, certainly didn't have platforms for freedom of expression. So Soul was born out of that moment and really changed the landscape of television. So not only was it like a vehicle for African-American artistry, but it was a platform for political expression and the fight for social justice. That certainly was not the model we knew, you know, for television in terms of what we saw.
Artists came on the show.
My gosh, the artists were tremendous. You had a bevy of artists from people who had never been seen but had been heard. Artists like Earth, Wind, and Fire were on the show for the first time. Al Green on the show for the first time. Nikki Giovanni interviewing James Baldwin. So you had a wide range of poets, artists, activists. Kathleen Cleaver of the Black Panthers. You would have people that may have been songwriters but had never performed, like Ashford and Simpson. People who'd just written their first novel, like Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou. Basically the icons of the African-American icons of the 20th century, but just hadn't really been exposed on television before, certainly not in this format with, you know, Black artists produced by Black people for a Black audience. That was really, really unique. In some ways, it was revolutionary. He was kind of hosting the culture in a way. That was
and what brought you to wanting to make a documentary about the show?
You know, I have several reasons that I really wanted to make the film. First of all, I was in love with this show Soul, which really is a movable feast of artists and, you know, change makers of our time. But it's beautiful because you're seeing them in their early stages of their career, and it's just a gold mine of beautiful unseen footage. And I realized, gosh, you know, it's the 50th anniversary of Soul because it came on September the 8th, 1968. So as we approach the 50th anniversary, and I realized, wow, this is such a beautiful embodiment of Black excellence as we know it today. Black power, Black strength, Black love. And this is a story that we really need right now. And, you know, in our, once again, tumultuous times. Also, I realized that a lot of the icons and the artists and the culture makers of African-American life are growing older and more fragile and leaving us. And so I wanted to make sure that their stories were told by them. And then, of course, I have to say there's a family connection because the host of the show is sort of an iconic and unusual, reluctant host who became somewhat of an interesting figure and changed the landscape of television was Ellis Haizlip. He was the producer and director and host of the show, and he happens to be my uncle. So I had this, you know, great urge to tell his story from a family perspective as well, this unique man who placed his unique stamp on this show, but also to honor his legacy and, of course, the legacy of the artists who were on the show, and to talk about where we are now in terms of representation, diversity, and how far we've come and how far we have yet to go, especially in terms of representation, which is so important. So it was a lot to chew. It was a lot to bite off.
When did you start working on the documentary?
My gosh, I started 10 years ago, to be honest with you. Wow. 2008, I came up with the idea. And I wasn't sure how to get it done because I knew it was going to be ambitious. I knew, we're standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of the time period that we're covering, the great swell and change and in the nation and culture as a vehicle for change, that concept, and also the great artists on the show and many who have become very famous and household names. So I thought, gosh, how am I going to wrap my mind around that and have this really progressive show in this film, illuminated in the film, and still bring in all the elements of culture and history and still get all of these people involved in it. So it was quite a big undertaking at first and involved a lot of research to sort of approach it with an academic spine and to have sort of an academic board of advisors on our team to help us really situate the story and properly tell the story and contextualize it in the history of our people and our nation. So that took a long time. Sort of research and development was for the first couple of years. And then we shot our first interview in 2009 and tried to figure out how to put together a fundraising platform so that we could get other people to believe in the project and to find foundations and nonprofit organizations and grants that would fund it, because we really wanted it to be by the people, for the people, since Soul came about and was completely funded by grants by the Ford Foundation in 1968. So we thought, well, we want to do the same thing. We want to have a film that belongs to the people telling that story. So we spent a lot of time raising funds, and before crowdfunding became popular, then we jumped on that bandwagon too.
I remember this from Kickstarter. You guys did a Kickstarter campaign.
We sure did, 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And I just want to say that I was one of your supporters for Kickstarter.
Oh, yay.
And I was like laughing to myself because we've never met. So I'm like, okay. Well, this will just be my
that's so
my
perfect.
secondary opportunity to support the project.
Oh, thank you so much. It was frustrating with Kickstarter because we had a phenomenal Kickstarter campaign. And then at the very last second, literally in the last 24 hours, we didn't have enough funding.
Yeah.
So we had sort of an angel donor who pulled out at the last minute, which was surprising to us. And so we weren't able to meet our goal. And with Kickstarter in the beginning, if you don't meet your goal, the whole project falls apart and you don't actually get the money. So that was a crushing blow for us, but we learned an important lesson, which was that people were out there who wanted to support the film and who wanted to believe in the project and who loved the concept of Soul. So we started building a family around that. And then we were able to recover some of those pledges by doing sort of like going through our fiscal sponsor instead. So thank you for sticking with us.
Yeah. And that was the first time I had seen anyone do that. I mean, I think everyone knows to do it now. Like, even if you don't make it to your goal, you send a follow-up email and ask people to just give you the money anyway.
Sure.
Which is what you guys did. And I was like, whoa, you could do that? That's awesome.
Yeah. I didn't know we could. I just took a chance, because it's asking a lot. Everyone likes to get on a moving train. But then if it appears that you haven't met your goal, it sort of, dampens the spirit a little bit. But we just realized that, the model of Kickstarter in the beginning was really strict. And so, but it was really an eye-opener because it was great to meet the community out there and to have a little piece of something that you could push around electronically and share and have people feel like they were part of the journey, which was really important. Yeah.
And so after you did all of the fundraising and stuff like that, how did you make those decisions about what to finally include in the film versus not? Because it seems like you had tons of footage that you could have used for it.
We had so much footage. There are 130 episodes of Soul over the 5 years from 1968
Wow.
to 1973. And we wanted, some of them are just so spectacular. We could just sit there and watch them for hours. Like there's of course, no spoilers or anything, but there are sort of the highlight of our film centers around this incredible interview that happened in 1972 between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. And it was so profound that they made it a 2-hour episode, a 2-hour special, which they broke into two 1-hour episodes. And I could just watch that all day, because they're talking about life and love and the Black family, how to support each other, arguing about, being artists and being writers, and if that's a sustainable career. I mean, it was just so forward thinking and so open and so real. And of course, you have an iconic poet interviewing an iconic author, and one is sort of mentoring the other, and it just was so rich. And we must have watched that 1 million times over the course of 6 years. And so things like that were very, very difficult. But how we put it together was the idea that we were really telling 3 stories. And could we bring those stories into one? So we had literally, and for those filmmakers out there, we had 3 different storylines or timelines, as you call them, or we called it either a storyline or a timeline or a sequence. So storyline A would have been the story of Soul. And that's start to finish. That's easy because we have the markers 68 to 73. We're only dealing with those 5 years. But we literally built out the show, and the most important episodes of the show, sort of the hallmark moments, the high water marks, our favorite, can't live without, musical performances and appearances. And as the show, we also wanted to show how the television show evolved over time, starting from being like a low budget, public television, almost looked like a public access type style, to evolving into having great directors like Stan Lathan, and the beautiful color and vibrancy and the production value changed as the years went on and the guests got fancier, etc. So that's storyline A. Then storyline B would be the story of, so you have the biography of the show. Now let's have the biography of the man. So that's Ellis Haizlip, the host. And of course, we didn't want it to be a cradle to grave biography. He started born here and he died here, but let's drop in on those same 5 years from 68 to 73 and find how he evolved from sort of a fish out of water kind of reluctant host in the beginning to being really integral to the style of the show, and people fell in love with him and nicknamed him Mr. Soul. So we drop in on those 5 years of his life. We have some flashbacks to his early life to understand who he was before and a little bit of what he did after. So that's storyline B. So storyline C then, that's the zeitgeist, or what's happening in the nation and what's happening in our nation of people, our Black people. What's our journey from 60 to 73, and launching from post-civil rights, the death of Martin Luther King, and how we grew as a people, and what was the story of our struggle and our rise. So then we had those 3 storylines, and we had to collapse them into one and figure out what are the most salient points of each of those storylines, and can we collapse them? And that way, each point of the story we were telling, everything had to earn its way in.
Yeah.
So if we had a clip or a song, it had to earn its way in. It had to do double duty. It had to not just be a favorite performance, but it had to illuminate the feeling of the script at that time, or tell a story that the script was telling. So, like, for example, in the end, when the film is talking about the cancellation of the show, and you have that emotion of sadness and missing something and a great loss, we realized, that's when we can show Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes performing on Soul, because they were on in 1973 and they were singing Miss You, classic song. So you've got that emotional pull. It's earned its way in because it's telling the story. The underpinning of the score is telling the story. while somebody is talking. So we're constantly layering all three of those sequences together. And that's how we were able to weave between contemporary interviews, historical footage, archive of the show, and Ellis Haizlip's life. It was really ambitious.
Yeah. Sounds
And
like
it took about a year and a half to, honestly, to edit it, because we wanted to be accurate, first of all. So everything had to line up too. If we're talking about Nixon and the administration and his inauguration in '69, then we have to make sure we're seeing that exact footage from that moment. And also the exact footage from Seoul in '69 when the show was ending from the first season. So everything always had to line up, like we made a grid. And we had a giant wall with 3x5 color-coded cards for every side. I still have pictures. That wall haunts me, you know, and we would move our cards around. And then when we moved into the editing room, the cards became, we couldn't push the cards on the wall. We had to use Post-its. So then it became about the Post-its, and everything was like almost like Tetris, you know?
Absolutely.
And we had to look at it as a schematic almost. Like, does this work intellectually, historically, emotionally, and does it serve the story, and does it feel right too, and is it accurate? So that was really how we put it together.
And with Sam Pollard being your co-director on it, what did he bring to it that you didn't already have?
You know, in the beginning, Sam actually fell in love with the project because he knew Ellis Haizlip, and he is a product of the '60s, and had been, his first job as a director, as a young director, was working at Channel 13 in a development program they had for directors of color. So he sort of always looked at Ellis Haizlip as being an icon, and he used to watch that show when he was a kid. And the feeling of, you know, there was something on television that looked like him. He said, it looked like me. My family would call us to the living room when Soul was on, because it was the only thing that looked like me, he used to say. So he was really enthusiastic to come on board back in 2010. And he originally was going to be our editor. But then, you know, Sam is an extraordinary editor. He's edited a ton of Spike Lee movies and a ton of really important documentaries, like When the Levees Broke, and for the two Katrina docs for HBO, and also Four Little Girls for HBO. But we realized soon after that, you know, he was evolving more into being a producer director. So he said, well, why don't I come on board to direct it with you, and then I can sort of be more of a mentor and help you navigate. You know, he's done 1 million films, and he's done like 6 or 7 American Masters. He's the king of documentaries. So it was just really great to have him on our side and in our corner. Even though I did most of the heavy lifting and it was all my concept. Sam Pollard is a legend, and he opened a lot of doors for us.
Sure.
And that's really, really important to have, you know, legends and icons on your side. He teaches at NYU, as you know. He's been teaching for like almost 30 years now. So just to have his name on the project and to have him believe in us was really spectacular, because of the relationships he has and because of his knowledge. He would do a lot of watch downs and give notes.
You know? What is a watch down?
A watch down is when you work on a sequence for a really long time, and then you come in, you might break it into the first act, or for us, the storylines. And then you come in and you watch it down and take notes. And then you do like a feedback session with the notes, and then you work through the notes and change everything or discuss everything. So we did that constantly. I think I could write a book on all of our note sessions. I saved all of them. Sometimes they were heated, but all the times they were necessary, because, you know, when you have someone as established as Sam, who understands structure and understands, you know, what works commercially or what works better and for PBS, there are a lot of things to consider in your storytelling when you're trying to be unique and you're also trying to be economic.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that you are working within the confines of, say, an 82-minute documentary for PBS versus maybe an hour and a half for theatrical. So you're always having to think about, I have to be economic with my storytelling, even though I might be passionate and want this sequence to be 20 minutes long. Maybe I only have 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, someone who is a veteran like Sam can sit down and, shred your work, tell you what's working
Yes.
and what's not. And that, you have to put on your big girl pants and take it and understand, from a seasoned eye, how is our work adding up? Is it going to be good? Is it telling the story? Is it honest? So we did that almost every day. There's like a work session and a feedback session, note session. And it's tough because you're constantly putting your heart and soul into your work and your story, but you have to be open to being critiqued on it,
Mm-hmm.
so that the final project is as good as it can be.
And what did you do personally to allow yourself to be open to all the feedback?
My personal credo as a producer is to know your strengths and hire your weaknesses.
I like it.
It is like, it might as well be a post-it on my forehead. I walk around with that every day. Know your strengths, hire your weaknesses. It's a curse to have lived with this project for so long, because I knew what I wanted it to look like, and I knew the story I was telling. But then recognizing your weaknesses, and that you might not know how to do certain things, and you have to surround yourself with an extraordinary team that's going to have your back. That means a killer editor, an extraordinary producer, in our case, an archival producer.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who I could say, this is a story I'm telling. These are the visuals I need. Where are the bodies buried? Where can you find me the video footage or the photo?
Mm-hmm.
Can you get these things? And then that person would say, yeah, here's a roadmap, and give me 5 pages of literally links to archival footage that would address exactly what we're talking about. So that person has to be well versed, and I have to sort of abdicate and say, I'm trusting you. This is what I need to tell the story. Can you go get me the supporting materials? So for me, it was allowing myself to be open, that even if it's the story I want to tell, that I have to allow the team to come together with me. And, they always say it takes a village, but it takes a smart village, a real smart village, because you have to make sure you're aligned with the people you're working at, that they're going to give you what you need. And so if I say, I'm trying to embody this idea of the Black Arts movement, what does that look like visually?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I find images that haven't been seen already? How can I get stuff that is just mind-blowing, that we haven't already seen in, Ava DuVernay's The 13th, or we haven't seen in I'm Not Your Negro, or the popular films that have come out that sort of showcase that era. So
but I think that the Black Arts movement has not been fully addressed.
No, you're so right. I agree 100%. And the part of the issue around that for us was literally trying to visualize a movement. We had the incredible sort of bookends. If you were writing a book, the chapters would probably start with Amiri Baraka and end with Sonia Sanchez, But all of that in between, it's a movement, it's a feeling, it's a lot of spoken word and performances and art. It's tricky because you can't, for us, you have issues of financing.
Mm-hmm.
How expensive can you go in terms of what the visuals you're going to pay for? Mm-hmm. No, you can't use that incredible piece of art by Roy DeCarava, or no, you can't have that image that was like the perfect embodiment of the Black Arts movement as a painting, because when you license paintings, they cost $8 million. Mm-hmm. So we had to just really be smart about really showing and embodying the story that we were telling, both with the interviews that we used and the imagery and the footage to support it, and also make sure it hadn't been seen and that it was interesting. So yeah, that's basically how I remained open, knowing that every team member was bringing something to the table and trusting that they were on their A game and that they were going to help support the film in a way that would be really unique.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to do that sometimes, especially as a woman in charge, you know. you have some issues there, but you get a great team behind you. And
did you feel I just imagine like working with Sam, and because he is so stellar, and his his resume and his aesthetic and all the things, right? Like, so, but was there ever a moment where you kind of had to say, I got this, and let me have this part to him?
We had a lot of agreements and disagreements. We have a very different style of filmmaking. But the nice thing about Sam was that he always had our back and always, you know, my issue was, well, you're Sam Pollard and I'm not, so I need to listen to you. Mm-hmm. You know, pride, what is it? Pride cometh before the fall. I really always deferred to him. But at the same time, I knew that I was doing something unique, which was kind of a hybrid film because it was part biopic, it was part music doc, it was part historical doc, but it was never just one thing. And the idea was, and I'll tell you, the impetus and also the nagging, what's a good way of saying it? What kept me going, really, was the whole idea that Soul was so unique and so visually compelling and innovative for its time. In order for us to tell this story in a contemporary modern time, we had to step it up, whether it was the quality of what we were showing, the way we were shooting it, the cinematographer, the special effects, graphic effects. We had to step up and make sure that what we were doing was commensurate in terms of being innovative for what Soul did in its time. Because, or else it would fall flat, you know, to go from something incredible to something average. And so the pressure was always on to make sure, are we going to make this compelling enough? Are we going to make it beautiful enough? You know, that's why I worked with Hans Charles, who is an amazing cinematographer. He did award-winning photography and a really beautiful, innovative eye in terms of the way he frames Black people and the way he lights them and works together with Christian Epps, who's his sort of ace gaffer. And together they've literally come up with a new language for Black imagery and Black film that I think is so compelling. And we wanted that because the footage of the show itself, as I said, is so beautiful that we had to find a way to match that. And so with Sam, you know, he always knew that. And I think at one point he sort of said to me, this is yours. I want you to run with it. I've done 1 million films and you need to like make this your baby and go for it. And once again, I said, yeah, but you're Sam Pollard. I just want to remind you, I'm not, this is my first film. And he said, nope, I want you to put yourself out front. And, you know,
that's great.
Really very supportive. Really supportive. Yeah. And his work is amazing. And he's also a very busy man doing 10 to 15 projects at once. So we were lucky whenever he dropped in on us.
And are you, what's your plan now? I know that it's doing a lot of festivals right now, which is awesome.
We wanted to bring it to as many festivals as possible because we want the people to see it. And even while we're doing the festivals, certain festivals are more about the communities that they serve. Others are more of a market. And so you can try to sell the film, get press for the film and excitement and really a groundswell of support behind it. That's what we wanted to do. We're also obviously looking for distribution. And so the best place for distributors to see how a film is performing is in festivals, especially if you win awards or you get to be the opening night film or, there's buzz created from it. So all of that has been really wonderful. We've won 12 awards so far.
Really?
which was remarkable. Yeah, jury awards and audience awards,
Nice. Very nice.
which we weren't expecting, but it's a lovely, lovely reward in a way. But mostly just to be able to share it with people and get people excited and people talk about it. And because it's for the people, that's really why we did it. It's not so much about us as it is giving back.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now we're trying to find distribution for about 5 different windows. We obviously want to have a window on PBS. Then we want to have a theatrical window so we can share it nationwide, or at least some of the big cities, and maybe even qualify for award season if that's in the cards. We'll see. Then we want to have a distribution educational, really important, so that we can make it available for students and put it in libraries and universities and do an HBCU tour and really bridge the gap for our young folks, especially our African American youth, which is really important. And then we want to have like a streaming window as well, so like a Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, that type of option for folks who like to get their content that way on their iPhones, or their people really like to curate their own lives and how the content they want to get from that. So we have to respect that too. And of course, we just want it to be seen by the widest audience. We were in the UK for our UK premiere, and wow, the soul heads there were so enthusiastic. We were screening at BFI, the British Film Institute, and amazed and reminded that the folks over there love soul music and soul culture. And I was reminded of the fact that, perhaps because culturally and historically they didn't suffer through, well, the other end of it, but slavery and civil rights and issues of, inequality. So their appreciation of Black culture is not marred by that. It's not informed by that. They don't have that history in their cultural memory. And so they just love Black music for what it is, and Black culture in this sort of retro moment that we're covering. So folks were really enthusiastic in the UK, and I hope that, engenders more of a really good response for when we look for our international distribution as well. Maybe it can be on BBC, or sort of a BBC partner to like a PBS type of channel.
Well, that's
We'll
awesome.
see.
I'm really excited to see. It's not the end of the journey for you, because you still have to do the distribution.
It's just the beginning.
I know.
This is the hard part.
This
Who
is a
knew?
great milestone, though, moment for the project, which is really cool.
It is really wonderful. And, it's not lost on me. I'm so humbled and so grateful, because you have your head down for so long. And, as a Black woman, as a Black woman director, as a person who's making her first film, you have your own struggles that seem insurmountable. And you're trying to get people to believe in you, not just your project, and not just something that was a cultural phenomenon, but the fact that you're doing it. Right. There's always that question. Do you deserve to tell this story? And ironically, we have larger issues right now about cultural appropriation and who gets to tell what story, and erasure, especially erasure of Black culture, queer people of color, erasure of those stories, both past and present. But when it comes to, do you deserve to make this film, and will we support it? Having to get past those hurdles has been even harder, I think, than making the film. Even though the film was
What would you say is, how have you gotten past or over those hurdles?
I've always put the project first and tried to show that the story of our people and the story of like diversity and Black excellence is the story of our nation, that it's not just a separate story, that it's a universal story. And to find people the strength around that, and to share that, to remind people that this is our journey. Because people say, they try to pigeonhole the film and say, oh, it's just a music doc, or oh, it's just a Black film. And you say, no, it's about Black history, but Black history is American history. It's about queer history and queer people of color, but it's about the larger acceptance of a nation of people within a larger nation. And it's about, the birth of diversity and inclusion. All those stories are issues that we're dealing with right now. Mm-hmm. So it's very relevant to us now as we struggle through this abominable administration, just as Nixon was the nemesis to public expression and anything progressive on television. And, we do know that he was not fond of people of color either. So a lot of what we're talking about it's almost cyclical that we're having these same stories now. So I've used that to push the story forward. And I think of myself as pushing gently from behind. I don't always try to draw too much attention to me. But then I realize when I go to these screenings and these young women come up to me, or young Black women especially, with tears in their eyes.
Yeah.
And I say, what's up? Well, hey, I hug everyone. I'm for some reason the film makes everyone want to hug. I hug everyone, but it's the young women who say, you are an inspiration because you're doing it. And I'm like, huh? I've just been doing it for 10 years, but the idea of getting something done and getting something out there and still being a Black woman and still being able to acquire footage, to acquire funding, to engender support, that is really important to keep pushing, because every little win or every little increment or every little opportunity is one step forward for the next person, in my mind. For these young girls who are coming up to me and with stars in their eyes and tears in their eyes saying, you give me strength, or you gave me life. This film gave me life tonight. I had two young women two queer women of color who came up to me and said, thank you for being so honest. Because Ellis Haizlip was an openly gay man at a time when it was very hard to be Black, let alone Black and gay. And so he became somewhat of a queer icon in broadcasting, at least with this show. And so, that's very moving to people as well, that we have elevated him to being a hero as opposed to being a victim. And I approach the entire subject matter of the film that way, saying, we as a people of Black people, we have come through so much, and there's been so much focus on the struggle. And I thought, well, yes, we are born of that, but look at where we are now and the legacy of pushing forward. And we have to remember that we have to keep pushing and not to define ourselves from that victimization or that struggle, but that we have, like the phoenix rises from the ashes, we have pushed through that. And as James Baldwin says in the film, we have come through something. And if we can get this far, we can get further. And Nikki Giovanni says, yeah, and in the context of, but how can you be a Black writer and survive and have a sustainable career? And he says, sweetheart, in that classic James Baldwin tone, sweetheart, our ancestors taught us how to do that. We have survived until now. And it's just a wonderful moment. I know it makes my skin tingle every time, and the audience snaps and they love it, and we realize, wow, God damn, pardon my French, I'm sorry, but when you realize, yes, we have come through something. And when I would wake up as a Black woman struggling and not getting the funding and not getting the recognition I needed and feeling impaired or not supported as an independent Black filmmaker, I would just remember, Ellis did this. Ellis created this 5 years of Black excellence against all the odds. If he could do it, I can do it. And if he could do it at the time when Martin Luther King had just been assassinated, then I can do it. Or the next person, the next generation. Or if the folks that Malcolm and Martin were trying to lead could do it. I just keep going back and back and back until we get to the ancestors. And that's where I find my strength.
I almost feel like we should end it there, but I have one quick other
Yeah.
question. um, is it possible to see old episodes of Soul?
Yes, it is possible. There are two places, and I'm hoping that with the success of the film or the excitement around the film, that we have built an interest in the original content that will help revive it. And I believe it deserves to be seen and should be in the vaults. And they've kept it successfully. There's a little bit you can find on YouTube, but because there's so many rights issues of artists and music publishing, etc., they've kept it kind of under wraps. But there are two ways you can see it. If you are a member of PBS, if you have a membership or you're supporting your local station, there's something called Pbs Passport, which comes along with your membership, or you can pay a certain amount. Unfortunately, there is a little paywall. You have to get past that. But PBS and Channel 13 in New York, they have a total of, I think, 9 episodes that you can watch. But then they also did a deal with another company called Shout Factory. shoutfactorytv.com/soul. I believe that's right. shoutfactorytv.com/soul. Shout Factory houses a lot of sort of vintage and retro television shows and old favorites. So they now have 20 original episodes, and you can watch those without paying and without interruption, without any commercials. So, but I'm hoping that maybe the film, which is kind of like, I think of the film as like the gateway drug into soul, and it's going to want to make you see everything. So I'm hoping that they will re-release the original episodes either in a box set or a DVD or streaming option, like a package. And then it can be, because it really should be seen. It was originally made for the people by the people, and I believe it still deserves to be. Awesome. So we're working on that. I obviously don't control it because it's not my content and I don't own it. It is still owned and licensed by WNET, the original presenting station.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been really insightful. Really, it's been really great. So again, for me, it's always inspiring to see someone to know about something from way before and to see it kind of continue to blossom and evolve over time. So I'm really excited for you. And I'm glad that I got a chance to see the movie.
Oh, I'm so glad. And look for your name in the credits, because we are putting every single name. We had to do a short version of the credits for the festivals, but we're putting every single name of every single person who gave to our Kickstarter. It's going to have to speed by a lot faster, but they've already given us flack for having a long film, because it's hard to program a longer film. They usually like the double digits, as we say, like you don't want it longer than 99 minutes. But we're almost 115 minutes, which is almost 2 hours.
Wow.
So, but we just needed to have that festival version, and then we'll do a cut down for PBS and a cut down for theatrical, but we're still going to get everybody in there, whoever supported us. So
I don't mind hitting pause so I can here it is.
No, I've had some folks who are mad who finally got even a text somehow got my number and texted me saying, "You said you were gonna
oh man
tell everybody when the films were happening, and I gave to your Kickstarter." I'm like, oh my God, so sorry. I've just been running ragged, trying to finish the film.
Man.
With no money. I got you. I will invite you as soon as we come to your town. But that's lovely, because that's real. That's people who really cared enough to find your cell phone and call you out, because we will do that. We will come for you.
I'm almost afraid to ask, how do people find you? Or
oh no, I am obviously very accessible. Yeah. No, I love it. Everyone, we're on a lot of social media now. So we're on the Instagram, of course, at Mr. Soul the Movie. Same for Facebook, at Mr. Soul the Movie, and Twitter as well. And then I have a personal Twitter page, which is Haizlip, at Haizlip, Haizlip. We have a website that we're updating because it was a little old. We made it back when you couldn't write on it. You couldn't change it. So we're in the midst of updating that. And so, yeah, we're out there. We're we love to hear from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's the web address? The web.
Sure, it's www.mrsoulmovie.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And have a great rest of your day, and good luck with the rest of the screenings.
And thank you so much for supporting us and for letting us chat. That really means a lot.
You've been listening to Directing Magic with Marquette Jones. Be sure to visit directingmagic.com for past episodes and other information relating to the show. Also, be sure to subscribe and rate and comment on iTunes. Until next time, bye-bye.